Welcome to Social Anxiety Solutions, your journey to social confidence. My name is Sebastian van der Schrier, and I'm an ex-social anxiety disorder sufferer. And I've been able to overcome my social anxiety thanks to energy psychology and the help of some brilliant therapists. Now, on this show, I interview experts. It used to be every week. Now it's once a month. And I interview these experts on their best social anxiety solutions. And it's both from Western traditional psychology as well as Eastern energy psychology. Now, today I'm interviewing Dr. Dawson Church on the science behind energy psychology. Here's a bit about Dawson. Dawson Church, PhD, is an award-winning author whose best-selling book, The Genie in Your Genes, has been hailed by reviewers as a breakthrough in our understanding of the link between emotions and genetics. He founded the National Institute of Integrative Healthcare, the NIIH.org, to study and implement promising evidence-based psychological and medical techniques. He has published many scientific papers in peer-reviewed journals, collaborating with scholars at various universities on outcome studies of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, and anxiety. His groundbreaking research has been published in prestigious scientific journals. He's the editor of Energy Psychology, Theory, Research, and Treatment, which is a peer-reviewed professional journal. He's a blogger for the Huffington Post, and he shares how to apply the breakthroughs of energy psychology to health and athletic performance through the EFT Universe website, which is one of the largest alternative medicine sites on the web. Dawson, thank you very much for being on the show.
Sebastian, thank you not only for having me, but also for your mission to help people who have social anxiety get over it. So I'm so grateful to you for doing that.
Nice, thank you. As I said earlier, I'd like to talk first a little bit and share my story of how I found energy psychology, and because I think it is met with skepticism when you first hear about it, and that's definitely how it was for me. Like, when I had severe social anxiety, we're talking about 15 years ago now, and I realized that there was something I could do about it. I started doing the typical things, affirmations, visualizations, facing my fears, listening to hypnosis tracks, anything I could get my hands on. And I would only get some temporary boosts of confidence, especially after I faced my fears, but it was temporary. I won't go into all the weird things I did, but I did quite a bunch of weird things. And so I kept searching, and eventually I found EFT. And I found that online, and this guy was on a video. He's like, yeah, it often works where nothing else works, and blah, blah, blah. Just tap here on your face and think about this. And I'm like, yeah, right. But I was, curious enough to look into it more, or desperate enough. That's probably another way of saying it. And I remember looking onto a couple of forums and typing in, hey, is this the real deal or what? And I got a lot of people commenting on it. And then the more research I did, the more stuff I found of people raving about it. And it actually didn't work very well for me initially because I couldn't tune into any emotions. But I read so many testimonials that I'm like, all right, I'm going to order this. So I ordered all the DVDs from Gary Craig, the original founder. And there I saw these EFT experts working with people with a wide variety of issues. And if I remember correctly, also people with PTSD. I'm not sure if I remember that correctly. But anyway, like I saw these people transform on screen. I think it's like 40 or 60 hours of content. And I would see it happen over and over and over again. So I was starting to build a confidence that this method could really work. And all the while I was trying myself, sitting in my room, tapping on my face and, saying these phrases and focusing on affirmations. And I wasn't doing it very effectively. I wasn't doing it very accurately either. But that's a different story. Anyway, eventually, maybe 3 or 6 months later, when I was in the Netherlands, because this happened when I happened to be in South Africa, I I contacted this EFT practitioner. I'm like, hey, I've got this problem with blushing, and I feel really anxious around people, and you know, I think that this EFT thing works, but I'm not sure if it actually works for me. So what do you think? He's like, well, maybe just come to an EFT workshop, and we'll see how things go there. I'm like, okay, good. And then when I showed up in the workshop, they first teach you the tapping, and then eventually it was practice time. And then when it was practice time, I was the practitioner, and I worked with a client, and she had I think a fear or a sadness, and it started out 7 out of 10 strong. We did the tapping, and it was gone. And then I observed it happen with other people. Great. And it was amazing to see. But then when it was my turn, they couldn't get anything with me. And so they called in the workshop leader, and he comes over, and he started asking me some difficult questions. I think I was 18 or 19 at the time. Whatever, maybe 2021. I'm kind of forgetting the actual ages of this. But he was asking me a couple of difficult questions about dating or sex or virgin or girlfriend or whatever. And I was massively ashamed of this. And so now I was talking about this, or confessing rather, in front of all these people. And my problem now was in the room, because I became massively embarrassed and ashamed. And so my face flushed and my shame went through the roof. And he's like, all right, now do the tapping. And as I did the tapping, as I started stimulating these acupressure points, it was like something was shifting inside. Like I started to calm down, and I was feeling more accepting. I was feeling more relaxed. And, I did the tapping for 5 minutes, and I couldn't even bring that shame back. Now I could talk about it freely, and something had shifted inside. And I described this before. It's like a plug was pulled, and all the emotion was just flushed out of my body. And in place of that was really like oh my God, like a relaxation that I hadn't felt before with any of the other stuff I combined. And I knew that something was different, and I knew that something really special had happened. And that was like, all right, now my skepticism is out of the water. I know that this stuff really works. I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever it takes to use this to overcome my social anxiety. And it has taken me a long journey to overcome it. And, since then I've been avidly spreading news. But kind of brings us to right here, right now, when we're talking to you, Dawson, who knows stuff about the science behind it, which is very exciting. So kind of leads me into my my first question. If people are skeptical about EFT or about energy psychology, what can you say to them? Like, what is your unique experience, and what is your science insight that you can give them?
Well, there is a lot of science behind EFT. There are over 100 scientific studies that have been published in peer-reviewed medical and psychology journals. So there's lots of studies supporting EFT. But usually, Sebastian, the key piece of proof that you give people isn't the science. It's not facts, it's not argument, it's not persuasion. It's the experience you had inside your body. When you feel, you describe that, all that tension is draining out of your body. Now, two things happened there. One is that tension drained away. The first thing is that workshop leader evoked that in you. And we now know from a new science called memory reconsolidation and extinction. And this memory reconsolidation is a very new branch of neuropsychology, but it shows that to really have an effective release of traumatic stress, you have to feel it fully first. And so what you were doing in the workshop was you were feeling it fully. That was number one. The second thing is you were releasing it as you tapped. And so when you've had somebody actually feel that shift in their bodies, then there's no need to argue or debate or discuss it. they know because it's an experiential feeling in themselves. There's an old saying from the Gnostics, goes back about 3,000 years. It says, to the person who has had the experience, no explanation is necessary. To the person who has not had the experience, no explanation is possible.
Yeah.
So when you feel it in your body, that's the main thing. So when I do presentations, for example, to groups of psychiatrists or nurses or doctors or medical professionals, I usually will spend just 5 or 10 minutes quickly reviewing the science behind EFT and then give them an experience of it. Because, again, that takes out of our heads, out of theory, out of debate, out of processing things up here and into our bodies. And the truth is that actually you can process very little of your life effectively in your head. And techniques for change that rely on your mind making your body do things are a lot less successful than techniques that integrate both mind and body and emotions and spirituality all behind your goals. And so EFT does that. EFT releases all of those inner emotional, psychological, spiritual tensions, and then you just feel better, and then you can make progress toward whatever goal it is once you've let go of that energy structure that's been kept in place in your body for so long.
Yeah, exactly. What I love about EFT exactly is it is an emotional or an energetic approach, and there are other common approaches to overcoming social anxiety, which focus on the cognitive and the behavioral. I'm like, yeah, but social anxiety is not a logical problem. You can't think yourself out of your anxiety. It's missing an important component, the emotions. But they're saying, well, you should just face your fears and refocus and change your thoughts, and that all has value. I'm not saying it doesn't have value at all, because it does have value. But they're saying ignore the emotions, just change your behavior, and eventually your emotions will catch up. And my experience is that when you actually look at the emotions first, it makes changing your behaviors and changing your thoughts that much more effective and efficient and more gentle. You don't have to force yourself to grit your teeth and go for it.
I heard a funny quote recently. The quote was, if thinking could solve our problems, we would all be millionaires with six-pack abs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we have these problems, and we know we need to solve them. We know we need to change, and yet we can't. One of the most frustrating things on the spiritual growth and personal growth, the personal transformation path, is you should meditate. You should get up in the morning. You should exercise. You should spend more time in nature. You should spend more time with the loved ones in your life. You should make your values paramount in the way you live your life. You should have better work-life balance. We know all these things, and we still can't do them. And it often takes a crisis to make us do them. What we teach, I teach many live workshops every year, teaching EFT and meditation. And in those EFT workshops, I tell people, your problem is your friend. The crisis in your marriage that brought you into therapy, the weight crisis, the health crisis that finally prompted you to hire a coach or go to an EFT Universe workshop, that thing actually is it's your problem you're trying to solve, yet it is the assistant, it is the aid that has propelled you to change. And so those things usually begin as small problems. Weight begins as a small problem. Relationship failure begins as a small problem. Work failure, money failure. They begin small, and they tend to escalate. And they tend to escalate to the point where we pay attention and have to solve them. Or some people just fall into hopelessness. But most people try and solve them. And so that problem then gets you into counseling, gets you into the workshop, gets you into the online course, makes you read a book, makes you take some kind of action. So these things we think of as problems. Physical pain is a good one. I've now worked with, I probably worked with over 5,000 people in groups who have physical pain, and they just want the pain to go away. And yet that pain is a message from the body that something's wrong. And when they learn to listen to the body, read the body, respect the body, tune into the body, then the body doesn't have to give them pain. And in EFT research, the average drop in pain is 68% in about 20 minutes of tapping. People come, start tapping, and they're tapping for often very physical things. They're tapping for shoulder surgery that wasn't successful. And I've one funny one on, I've about 150 YouTube videos. And one is, at my live workshops, I always ask for people to come up and work with me if they have a purely physical problem. I don't want any kind of emotional component to this at all. I want you to come up and work with me up front here if you have a problem that is purely completely 100% physical. And so this lady, she was in her 70s, she was a really sweet lady, volunteered. She said, I had a rotator cuff surgery a few years ago. It was successful, but they shortened one of the muscles too much. And so I've had this pain in my biceps for the last 7 years since the surgery. And it never goes away. It started with the surgery. It's purely physical. So I began to tap with her. And I actually asked her a question. I said, if you had to give that pain in your biceps a name, what would you call it? And she said, I'd call it Fred. So I said, well, is there a real Fred in your life? And she said, my ex-husband. So we tapped on all the stuff to do with her ex-husband, and her biceps pain went away. And so it's interesting, so it's, whether it's the social anxiety, whether it's something else, these things propel us to change. And if we then take those as messages from our psyche, messages from our potential saying, I want you to transcend this, I want you to have a rich, full life, then we don't try and suppress these and make them into problems. We turn them into messengers that have valuable information for us that we can absorb, learn, listen to, and then release all of that tension, just like you did in that workshop, and then move forward in a good way with our lives.
Yeah, excellent perspective. I'm talking about social anxiety is just a symptom of a deeper underlying problem. And it's that symptom that starts to bug you so much eventually that you start to look at, all right, or, you get someone to help you to look at what's really going on here. And what is really going on here is, there's a perception that you're not safe socially, and why is that? Well, because I don't have a proper self-esteem. I don't accept myself. I have these traumas in my past that are still getting activated. I'm reliving my past. In other words, you're not living your full capacity. You're not living your potential. And you can see your anxiety as a message that that's what's going on. When you actually start to resolve all of that stuff, then you get to operate and function on such a higher level, and your life becomes so much better. And that translates itself not just into your social life, but other areas as well. So it's really fantastic once you actually start doing the work.
And this cuts both ways in terms of your brain development, because remarkable research in the late 1990s showed that if you take a signal and pass it through a neural bundle repeatedly for an hour, the number of synaptic connections in that neural bundle doubles. So every hour you're using that signaling pathway in your brain or your nervous system to pass a signal through, the number of synaptic connections doubles every hour, potentially. That's how much your brain is changing. So if you're now reinforcing this behavior over and over and over again, if you had these negative experiences as a child, you then reenact them in your first early adult relationships, you reenact them in later relationships, and you then have a pattern of reenacting them. Not only is this a behavior, it's actually becoming neural wiring, hardwired into your neural network. And so now you have an experience that should be a pleasant experience, a good experience, but you're perceiving it, processing it through a neural network that's geared and is configured to see the world a certain way. And so all incoming information is passing through this neural network. And so all of the ways all of the disabilities, inabilities, lacks, limitations, limited self-concepts you've acquired, those are now the filter through which you see the world, and you're highly likely to repeat those experiences because you're creating them because of your neural wiring. And the reverse works as well. If you liberate yourself, like we've now, in our nonprofit, we've worked with over 18,000 veterans with PTSD over the last 10 years. And we've seen thousands of these veterans literally just recover after a few EFT sessions from EFT. So when you do tap, when you do learn to release that energy, not just around one bad event, but around many bad events, around all the bad events of your life, suddenly then that process of neural plasticity starts to work for you, because you're no longer using those old neural circuits. You're building new neural circuits around feeling good, feeling love, feeling as though the world is a safe place, feeling kind, being able to receive kindness, being able to give, feel compassion. All these things start to shift. And you said earlier that when you make these changes, they propagate throughout your whole life to many other areas of your life. And they do. So this process of shifting your energy, shifting your emotions, shifting your way of being in the world winds up being not just a behavior, not just a thought, not just a belief system, not just a worldview, but literally being what's hardwired into your brain. In a new book I'm working on, which will be published next year, middle of next year, there is a chapter on this. And in one of my case histories, I look at the case of an Australian journalist. And this man was kind of a hard-bitten TV journalist, didn't believe in meditation and EFT and all these things. But he decided to go on an 8-week mindfulness course. And before he went on the course, these researchers at Monash University put him in a lab, gave him a comprehensive suite set of tests. They gave him an enormous number of tests of his cognitive ability, his reaction time, all kinds of ways in which his brain functioned. And they gave him a really detailed, comprehensive MRI measuring the volume in each part of his brain. He then began to meditate, be mindful, release his stress on a daily basis, and he found that he began to change really, really quickly. Within 2 weeks, he was no longer fighting with his colleagues. He was no longer having road rage. Behaviorally, he began to shift. In 8 weeks, after he finished this 8-week course, he went back to Monash University. They measured all the volume in all the different parts of his brain again. And there was one part of his brain, many parts of his brain changed in their volume by 2%, 4%, 5% in just 8 weeks. But the part that changed the most is called the dentate gyrus. And it's part of the hippocampus, part of the center of the brain, part of the emotional midbrain, the limbic system. And his dentate gyrus grew by 23% in those 8 weeks.
Wow.
That is how quickly your body is remodeling itself based on your experience. You change, and you start to change the way your brain is. And the dentate gyrus is a part of the hippocampus that manages emotional regulation and coordinates emotional regulation across the rest of the brain. So suddenly, now you aren't having road rage. You aren't screaming at your kids. You aren't getting upset with your parents. You aren't being mean to other people in your life. You aren't reacting. You aren't living a reactive life. And so your whole brain is changing this way. And it is phenomenally powerful to tap, to meditate, to start to bring these things into your life, because after a while, you literally reshape the entire wiring inside your skull.
Very, very exciting. So let me see if I understand this correctly. So people have a particular wiring. Their brain is kind of wired for social anxiety at the moment. And we can use tapping and meditation and to kind of help undo that wiring, not and create new wiring. In other words, there are roads that are very much roads in your brain pathways that have been traveled a lot. And so those paths are, easy roads for your brain to take. And we can use the tapping in order to make those roads less traveled. And then we can form new neural pathways. So you're creating new wiring. So wiring for social ease, for social confidence.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Very exciting.
Yeah, in fact, that process takes about 3 weeks. So it takes about, in an hour, the number of neural connections can double in a neural bundle. But if you quit using a neural bundle, if you used to be anxious and you no longer are reenacting that behavior, then within 3 weeks, the body says, gee, I noticed that neural pathway isn't being used. Even if you've been using it a lot for the last 30 years, suddenly the body says, start using that neural pathway. And within 3 weeks, the body will start to disassemble those neural clusters and remove that neural wiring. So it's happening in both dimensions.
Okay, so this piques my curiosity. So is it the case that your past traumas and your beliefs are causing your brain to take that particular, let's just say social anxiety wiring pathways. And that when you release those traumas, when you get rid of those beliefs, that you're less likely to take those, let's say, social anxiety neural pathways?
Yes, you're less likely to reenact them. Now, again, bear in mind that it's likely, if you trace this back to childhood, that this behavior was in some way helpful to you. There may have been somebody in your life who was threatening or mean or difficult or in some way intolerable. There may have been someone or some situation in your life that where avoiding them made a lot of sense.
Right.
And when you were 2, when you were 4, when you were 6, fight, flight, and freeze is a really viable and useful set of behaviors. You need to do that. But when you're 24, 25, 39, 52, not so helpful to be doing that. Now you have all the resources of adulthood, and often people are still acting as though they're 5. And so the challenge of that we have as adults is to reparent ourselves, is to go back and talk to those younger versions of ourselves, help them shift those. But again, those things were useful to us in some early stage of our lives. We've outgrown them, and they've outlived their usefulness.
Yeah, we talk about in therapy land. It's often said what our current problems used to be solutions at one point, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very exciting. One quick thing I wanted to bring back that I heard you say to give people a proper perspective. You said, well, we need to when you deal with all of the traumas from your past. And when someone hears that, they might be like, oh, my God, it's going to take forever and blah, 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 blah. But with EFT, it doesn't take that long to actually neutralize a particular traumatic experience. And there's also something called the generalization effect. Can you maybe talk about that?
This is a paradox in EFT, and with EFT, we have you focus on usually a single event, a single major emotional trigger that happened, and that event is usually one that was very brief. Maybe you were 12 years old and you had your first girlfriend, and you walked around the corner in the school and she was kissing another boy. So you had this experience of betrayal. Maybe you were 5 years old and you were playing with your older brother who was 9, and you were wrestling with him, and he lay on top of you and you couldn't breathe and you passed out. So you had this traumatic experience. So people have these kinds of early experiences. What we do is we have people in EFT find these early experiences and work on them in great detail, how it felt, the somatic experience of feeling your brother crushing you, the memory of passing out, your attempts to get him to stop and him not stopping. We have you work on this in great detail. You might think, I've had 5,000 traumatic events. Do I have to go to each one in that detail? And we have you go into one or a few of them in great detail with EFT, but there's a new part of psychology called memory, reconsolidation, and extinction. That's an amazingly interesting new line of research, and it shows that if you tell the brain that a certain stimulus is not a threat to your survival, then it depotentiates every similar stimulus that you have in your environment. So, for example, maybe you've been afraid of taller men ever since your brother lay on top of you and you passed out. So now you've had this irrational fear of taller people, and so you feel uneasy around them. You reinforce this for a long time. Now you work on that one event, and maybe you had 35 bad events with your brother. You work on one event, and when your hippocampus realizes that that event is not a threat to your survival, it generalizes that to all of the other similar events. It says, oh, that's not a threat. I'll give you one example from PTSD. There was a man that we worked with, and he was triggered by the sound of a plastic water bottle. You have a plastic water bottle in your hand right now. And Sebastian, before you put the top back on, just crush it like this, crackle it like this. Okay. When this guy who'd been in Iraq would hear that sound, he was triggered because it sounded like small arms fire to him. It sounded like pistols going off to him. So here he is getting this innocuous cue, which happens often. You hear a plastic water bottle, and it's been back from Iraq for 7 years, and is still responding to it. Now, we work with them with EFT. We tap with them one time. We then we break the dissociation in his brain between that sound and going into fight or flight. And once we break the association one time, it's not like we have to work on every single event like that. Break it one time around one big event, and suddenly the hippocampus then generalizes it. That emotional learning part of the brain says, oh, I now know that taller people are not a threat to my survival, and so then suddenly all of those stimuli go away. That's also why we always work early with EFT. We don't work on the adult events. We go and find the childhood ones and work on those at that early age.
Excellent. Excuse me. Back to my list of questions. Dawson, what's the most compelling evidence of EFT or EFT's effectiveness for anxiety specifically that might also be quite easy to understand for people?
There have been many studies of EFT for anxiety, and there's also been a meta-analysis of those studies. And a meta-analysis is a very sophisticated piece of data crunching where a researcher will take all of those studies. And so in this case, this particular researcher who works at Syracuse University in New York took 14 randomized controlled trials of EFT for anxiety, and she crunched the numbers, and there's a scale by which you can calculate how effective a therapy is. And on that scale, a therapy with some efficacy has a score of 20, a moderately effective therapy has a score of 50, and a highly effective therapy has a score of 80. So 20, little bit effectiveness, 50, effective therapy, 80, highly effective therapy. EFT on that spectrum was at 131.
Wow.
Highly effective for anxiety in those 14 randomized controlled trials, some of which were only one session for certain kinds of anxiety. So like public speaking anxiety, for example, most of the research is just a single session of that, and people's public speaking anxiety goes away. I worked with many people with public speaking anxiety, and again, usually in one session, it's gone.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What is interesting is a whole bunch of years ago, while I was still foolish enough to argue on forums with people whether EFT is the real deal or not, I posted on there some stuff that I found, and when you put some information there and people don't want to give in, they come up with counter information. And one of the counter things that people say is like, well, EFT is pseudoscience. Look, Wikipedia says so. And what would you say to someone like that?
I tell them to go and look at the evidence and then look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia was taken over around 2004, 2005. All of the alternative medicine entries in Wikipedia were taken over by a group of skeptics. They're highly organized. They're very aggressive in what they do. They deleted all of the entries on that were there already on things like energy medicine, energy psychology, and they wrote their own, calling these things pseudoscience. So acupuncture, they tagged a pseudoscience. And the acupuncture entry is just bizarre. Now, again, it used to be a good entry, but then they began inserting these things like pseudoscience into the entry. So even methods like EFT with over 100 studies, energy medicine, you'll read from Wikipedia, is pseudoscience. On my nonprofit website, we have a database of research published on energy medicine in peer-reviewed medical and psychology journals. There are over 600 studies there. And that doesn't even include acupuncture or energy psychology. It's energy medicine, over 600 studies showing it's effective for all kinds of diseases. Go to Wikipedia and it says it's pseudoscience. So this is skepticism of that nature is a faith-based system. And so when the faith of those skeptics is challenged, they simply dig in and deny it. And so one of the things that really disturbs me about our culture is science denial. And so there's science denial of evolution. There's science denial of climate change. There's science denial of energy medicine, energy therapies. And it's a real problem because, if we don't take action on climate change, it's causing us as a human species problems. If we don't get proper medical treatment because someone on Wikipedia has tagged a evidence-based therapy that's accepted. Like all of my classes, when I teach a live workshop, if you're a doctor, you'll get continuing medical education credit from the American Medical Association from taking my class. You'll take continuing education credit from the American Psychological Association for taking my class, and you'll go on Wikipedia and they'll tell you it's pseudoscience. So this is deep denial, and when people like these skeptics are able to seize public information sources like Wikipedia and pass off their faith-based belief systems, in which I respect people's beliefs completely. It's just that, I don't want to have them shoved down everyone's throat or presented as facts, and that's what Wikipedia is. So I would really, many parts of Wikipedia have wonderful information, but anything to do with alternative medicine on Wikipedia is just gonna very rarely be in accordance with an evidence-based approach to healing.
And what website would people go to get the? I'll ask you more about your own website, or it might be the same website. I don't know, but where would people go to check out some studies?
Well, we keep the only up-to-date current website of EFT research on the web, and it's called research.eftuniverse.com. So eftuniverse.com is my main website, and research.eftuniverse.com is the research page. Go there, or just type in, and just Google research EFT, and you'll get EFT Universe's website and research page, and right at the very top, and you'll read there about the American Psychological Association standards for research, accreditation of our trainings. You'll be able to find all of the links to all of the studies on PubMed, the U.S. government's database publications. So that's where you want to go to get the facts. And if anybody can do anything about Wikipedia, like if you're listening and you are a Wikipedia editor, please go to the talk pages of Wikipedia and make a comment, because for a long time now, more than 10 years, the skeptics have been able to just propagate this anti-science belief system in the pages on again, for chiropractic, for acupuncture, for homeopathy, for energy psychology. All of these kinds of therapies are tagged that way. And so it's one of those things which, if you can do anything about it, it's well worth giving it a try.
Yeah. Because it's a very unfortunate thing, something that is this effective, and people type in Google, whatever they type in, and they come to Wikipedia because it's such a popular website, and Wikipedia says it's not true. All right, well, I'm not even going to give it a go. They miss out tremendously, which, it's all right, good. We've said enough. All right, moving on. Why do you think that energy psychology and EFT isn't mainstream yet? Given that it's so effective, why is it not mainstream yet?
Well, any new therapy takes a while to catch on, even good therapies. And I wrote a paper in a very prestigious journal about this. And medical innovation is one of those areas which I think is, I'm trying to think of the right word here, Sebastian. It's astonishing. So what the U.S. government commissioned a panel in 2000 to figure out how innovations get from the lab to the patient. So we have breakthroughs in medicine. How do they then get into the hospitals, into doctors? And what this panel found was that of every 10 innovations in medicine, only 2 ever reach the patient. Only 2 out of 10 ever reach the patient. And it takes an average of 17 years for them to get to the patient.
Wow.
So, look, I'm using an iPhone over here, pretty new iPhone. It's great. And it has all these wonderful features. And I upgrade my phone every couple of years. And so when it comes to our cars, when it comes to the Internet of Things, when it comes to our computers and our payment systems and so many parts of our technology, we're in this frantic technological race to upgrade. When it comes to medicine and our bodies and our health, we are getting 20% of 17-year-old technology. That's what there is in medicine. And the whole enterprise of medicine is heavily biased against new technologies, not because there's any bad person out there, not because the drug companies rule the show, but because people go to college, they learn certain things in college. They've been taught by professors who learned their stuff a generation before. Then they graduate from college, and that's what they have in their toolbox. They then become doctors and nurses, and they go out and practice those things for a 30, 40, 60-year career. And they may update their knowledge a little bit, but the whole bringing a new therapy in, bringing any kind of new advance in, is very difficult. So that government panel found that, again, we get about only 20% of medical breakthroughs ever, and we get them 17 years late. So while we are advancing very rapidly when it comes to this kind of technology, there are amazing medical breakthroughs. There are amazing therapies out there. It's just that they aren't being practiced in the hospitals till, they'll show up there in 2050. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's generally just being looked down upon. I talked to my Dutch doctor about acupuncture, and he's kind of scoffed, like, oh, "You've been in Asia too long. What's wrong with you?" And that's the typical attitude towards it, which is also a big reason why I'm saying, hey, I'm interviewing Western traditionally trained psychologists, psychotherapists, doctors, researchers, who have that particular training as their default, who then have incorporated EFT or energy psychology into their practice, and now have the credentials while they rave about it. So, it's not just Joe off the street, but it's this person who has been a doctor or a psychotherapist for 20 years who's telling you, hey, my results with my clients are 10 times as effective, and what used to take years now takes, months or just a few weeks. And so that builds a lot of credibility. I also personally think that it's not mainstream yet because it looks a bit silly, and it's really the leading edge. I tell friends about it, and it's like, well, and I pre-frame it, right? I'm like, it looks a bit silly because you're tapping on your face and your body, and you probably think, you're looking like an idiot, and maybe you do, but who cares? It's actually going to get you the benefits. And then I'm the weird tapping guy for a while until I actually guide them through a bit of an experience, and then it's like, wow, tell me more about this. And it is spreading, and it's becoming more mainstream. Just from memory, I know it's been on Dr. Oz. It's been on help me out here, Psychology Today. It's been on really big platforms, and that's growing and expanding. And I think it is continuing to grow because it is this effective. So.
Yes, and any really good therapy, it's hard to suppress it, or it's hard for it to fall by the wayside. So, really, if there's an incremental improvement, then it may or may not get adopted. But when you have something that's a dramatic improvement, like with PTSD, our research shows that in between 4 and 10 sessions, people recover completely from PTSD in 90% of cases, and when we follow them up 6 months, a year later, they are still fine. So when a therapy is that effective in a short period of time, especially compared to a drug therapy, which may only mask the symptoms, and then you have to be on the drug for years or the rest of your life. So we're seeing a lot of people. I'll be doing a training this weekend. It'll be almost all mental health professionals. It'll be psychiatrists. It'll be psychologists. It'll be nurses. It'll be psychotherapists, social workers. So we train thousands of professionals every year. Life coaches using it in the Olympics. Many sports figures using it in the national Major League Baseball in the U.S., in the National Football League in the U.S. Many athletes using it. In the Olympics, again, there were a lot of people tapping. So again, athletes want an edge. They want something that will work and help them succeed. And EFT is quick, portable, easy to learn, and really works.
Awesome. I'd like to ask you a bit of a more personal question when it comes to doing research. So, if I would want to put a research thing together to look at the effectiveness of EFT for social anxiety. Typically, what I understand is that these research pieces are quite expensive. Like, what is required in order to put something like that in place?
Well, a research project can be expensive. My first pieces of research were really cheap. I would just do a workshop, like a weekend workshop or a 3-day workshop or a 1-day workshop, and I'd hand people a piece of paper when they walked in the door. I'd say, fill out this questionnaire. And it was a validated psychological questionnaire that would test for anxiety, depression, PTSD, and a few other things. They walk out the door at the end of the day. I had another questionnaire say, fill out a post questionnaire. And then once you've got 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 of those together, you've got a study. So that's very simple research. Where research is going, though, now is much more into the biology of EFT. Like, we just finished a $50,000 study of things called microRNAs. And this is a really exotic leading edge in terms of biology. We've also done several studies of gene expression, and those are expensive. So which genes are expressed when you do EFT? So we found in one piece of research that when you get just a 1-hour EFT session, that genes that code for cancer killing are turned up. Genes that are code for metabolism are being are increasingly expressed. Genes that code for immunity, like the production of red blood cells, and also the kind of white blood cells that kill invading organisms. All of those genes are being upregulated, are being dialed up by EFT, pervasive health benefits from just a 1-hour EFT session. And so those are expensive studies. They cost tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But basic research on behaviors and also on mental health issues like PTSD, phobias, anxiety are pretty easy to do.
Great. Okay. All right. Final question. If I did not ask you something that I could have asked you that would have allowed you to share something important, what would my question have been and how would you have answered it?
Sebastian, when I do live workshops, people tell us their stories. And so often they're on camera, they're coming up to the front of the room, they sit with me, they tell me their story. And it is just shocking to me how people suffer. They are suffering inside their heads in all kinds of ways. Like at one workshop recently, a young woman described an incident on a train where she was really triggered by a man who was unkind to her on a train. But it turned out to relate to another event in her early childhood. We worked on the early childhood event, and then she eventually came to a complete sense of peace about the early childhood event. And then she was no longer bothered by the man on the train. And then the lady sitting next to her, who was an elderly woman using a cane to walk around, suddenly felt so good she wasn't using her cane. It's just amazing how seeing people heal like that. But when they tell me those stories, like this this young woman, she's so competent, she's so professional, she's so together looking, and yet when she tells you what's happening inside her head, she's just suffering so much. And my heart just goes out to people when I hear these stories. And then I realize help and relief is right here at their fingertips. Just that little bit of tapping, a little bit of acupressure can help them feel enormously better. So that's really what I want you to know if you're listening. As you listen, know that your limitations and the things you believe hold you back are not objective truths. They are subjective coping mechanisms you developed as children, as a child, and which you've long since outgrown. And so let them go. You have enormously more potential than you realize. My forthcoming book is called Mind to Matter, The Astonishing Science of How Our Brains Create Material Reality. And in that book, I review a huge number of studies, over 500 studies, and they show that literally as we change our consciousness, as we change the way our minds work, our brain waves change. Those brain waves they're objective. I can measure them on an MRI, on an EEG, and as they change, they're sending signals to our cells that are affecting our telomeres, that are affecting our stem cells, that are affecting our enzyme production in our bodies, that are affecting cell regeneration, that are affecting cell metabolism, that are affecting our body's ability to fight cancer. All of these things are happening purely by changes in consciousness. And when you let go of those limitations and let go of that negative self-talk, you have a whole new you, and you make radical changes to your biology. You then make radical changes to your life. So our limitations we have in our heads are sad, tragic stories about why our life has to be this way. They're just constructs, and it's time to let them go and replace them with a story of love and potential and becoming the person you know you can be. You can be that person that you've suspected is inside, the giant inside of you. It is possible to be that huge force for good in your life, in your community, and in the world. And so I long for people to let go of their limitations, tap them away, release them, and then claim their full potential. So that's what motivates me to talk to everyone today, to do what I do in the world every moment. And it's just gratifying to see people share those limitations. And I can tell you, I've shared enormous limitations in my life. You'll hear people who've shared their limitations, and you can too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, and I think it's been very inspiring also to hear the science behind the tapping. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Go to my website, dawsongift.com, where you can download the free EFT mini manual and get all the instructions on how to do EFT yourself. That's just Dawson Gift, just my name, DAWSON gift.com. And the free mini manual is there. My meditation's there. There are a whole bunch of links to our certified practitioners there, our live workshops. We have a weight loss program, and we have a relationship skills program. Tons of links through dawsongift.com. Also, our Veteran Stress Project, we treat veterans free of charge. You can access through dawsongift.com. So that's the one place to go for access to all of those things.
Awesome. Dawson, thank you a lot for your wisdom and inspiration, and I really appreciate it.
Bless you, and bless everyone who's here and listening and watching.
Thanks.